Prostitutes or escorts, what was your first day on the job like? Was a stripper in my late teens. First day, I was nervous as Some drunk dude walks up to the stage, waving a dollar bill and said, "Slap your ass, I'll give you $1." Oddly enough, that made me somehow more comfortable with the whole thing. I actually enjoyed it, and wasn't half bad. Made more money, legally from 1720, than any other job I had until like 2 years ago. I'm 37 now. Story 2. Escort in a brothel. Edit. Escort is a commonly used synonym for all the other words for full-service sex worker where I'm from. Making a note as there has been some confusion. Honestly, my first day was a mixed bag. The other girl I worked with was hilarious and properly took me under her wing and fed me a glass of wine before my first John to settle my nerves. I haven't drank on the job since that day, but that one drink really helped. I got tipped by one client, assaulted by another. When I was assaulted, though, the other worker, the receptionist, and my boss all had my back and gave him a proper telling off and barred him. This was a one-off. It hasn't happened since. I've never felt safer in any other job, and I have more control. I walked home that day with more money than I'd earned in a week in my last job. I've never looked back. Story 3. Stripped briefly to pay for a semester's worth of tuition and books. On my first day, a lady shouted, "Whip out your pecker!" And I couldn't help but to laugh from both nerves, and the fact she said pecker. After that, the rest seemed pretty easy. Story 4. I'm long retired now, but I was 21 at the time, and at a loose end, new city and no job, so decided to work at a gentleman's club. As a prostitute, I'd done my research and been in for an interview, so I was feeling confident and relaxed. No one else showed up on time, so I was the only girl there on the day shift and sat chatting to the receptionists. My first client was a really good-looking English Sri Lankan guy who was really sweet and equally nervous. We both couldn't believe it was the other's first time until we were both fumbling and laughing, trying to put a condom on correctly. I can't remember who else I saw that day, but I do remember getting paid more than I had earned in a week, working 2 jobs. I ended up working for around 7 years and really enjoyed it. Story 5. I started as a waitress in a strip club. 3 months later, I tried dancing. My first time in the VIP, where I had been seeing the workflow for 3 months, so I knew what to say and where to go. But my hands were shaking. The guy even asked me if I was okay. After that first hour, it was fine, but my body literally was shaking in the beginning. I didn't feel scared, though. It was a natural reaction. Story 6. Former exotic dancer of 3 years. The first night was intimidating in part because the other dancers are generally hostile toward new girls. That may have just been the case at that club, I'm not sure. But also because the job itself is so heavily stigmatized that you find yourself afraid that somebody you know will see you. That faded after a few weeks, though, and it was actually a really fun job. You should always be careful not to fall into the lifestyle, though. Keep work and personal lives separate. 6.9K, dare I say. Nice double edit. 6.9 was a 69 reference, hence the nice. Didn't mean to confuse anybody. Sorry. Story 7. Terrifying. I was 21 years old and had never even stepped foot inside a strip club. I had bought a matching bra and underwear set from Marshall's, along with regular heels. Big mistake. I was told to watch the dancer before me on stage, who of course was gorgeous and clearly knew what she was doing. I went up there and immediately busted my ass because of the normal-sized heels. The rest of the time was just spent holding onto the pole for dear life and hoping I wouldn't get fired for being the worst dancer they'd ever witnessed. I wasn't fired and eventually got the hang of everything, but I still cringe at how awful those first initial days were. Story 8. Former male stripper here. It was awesome. It was comedic, sexy, and fun. Just an absolute party. The crowd had a blast. We quintuple lap danced the Bachelorettes. It didn't pay much, but I wasn't really in it for the money. I would totally start another show if I can make it happen. I only had 2 brief, uncomfortable moments that night. First, an old woman just grabbed my goodies. Second, another old woman shoved $1 so far between my cheeks that I didn't see it until after the show. Story 9. I'm well out of it now for a good many years, but when I was 16 and homeless, an older gentleman offered me a serious chunk of money for a weekend. He thought I was 14, I was hunger skinny, so it was believable. He had a hotel room, bought me some clean clothes and makeup, and left me alone for a few hours to get the street off of me. When he got back, he threw out my old clothes and took me to dinner. I spent 3 days with him, and none of it was terrible. I wasn't living my best life at the time, so the bar was pretty low. He was polite to me and wasn't rough. He let me drink in the evenings, but never let me get drunk or high, and had me call him Dad in public. He told me it was because it would look odd otherwise, but I called him a normal name that I'm sure wasn't his real name when we were alone, so it didn't feel particularly predatory. I never told him my name, so he called me Anna. We went out during the days, sometimes to eat or shop, once to the zoo, and sometimes I'd stay at the hotel while he went out. He didn't tell me much about himself and his life. Lots of old anecdotes from his younger years and silly stories. He liked me to tell him about my life, stupid teenage garbage, about my friends and parents, what kinds of things I liked and why. When we parted, he gave me a bit of cash, but used most of the money we agreed on to get me a motel room for a month. He talked about being worried about how I was living. Beyond the money I earned, he spent a bunch on groceries and toiletries that I didn't see until after he left, so I couldn't thank him. But I felt more cared for by this stranger who paid an underage girl for sex than anybody else in my life. He also extended my stay with management for another 2 weeks. The owner came to my door and told me not to check out yet. Having a room with a lock helped me hugely. I wasn't being robbed anymore, so I could work small jobs and hide cash. And I didn't have to worry about the violence I was trying to avoid before. And I wasn't taking drugs every day because my life didn't disgust me. When my stay ended, I was able to move into a group home and live a bit cleaner and safer, and never did the streets thing again. I did plenty of drugs and drinking, but just for fun and with friends, not to stay warm or stay awake. For context, this was in Canada and was very illegal. Edit, thanks for the gold. It's never happened before. I don't know what to do. Story 10, terrifying. My rent was due soon and I felt there was no other option, so I went straight to Craigslist offering sex. I was well aware of the possibility that I could be putting myself in serious danger, but at the time, getting my rent in on time was my only worry. I was advertising in a murder capital city. I hated it. I hated every man I encountered in sex work afterward, and I try not to think about that time in my life. I assumed that because I was already very promiscuous and used to having sex with strangers, that it wouldn't be so bad. But it's so much worse when you can't be picky. There's a reason those kind of men pay for sex. They tend to be creepy and unattractive to the point that buying sex is the only way they can get a woman to look at them. I'm sure I'll get downvoted. Reddit hates when I talk about prostitution because everyone has this wonderful, idealized picture of it in their heads. While I spent years drinking heavily just to get the images out of my own head, I ended up going to trade school and I now have a well-paying, exciting career in factory labor. But I wouldn't trade it for any kind of sex work. I actually enjoy my job, and I get to gladly tell any man that tries hitting on me there to go f yourself with an airline. Edit, remove the news story because it is identifying. Thank you to all those who have given me awards. Also, I understand the flack I'm getting for calling these men unattractive. I've had wonderful, consensual, satisfying sex with many traditionally unattractive men. However, I have no love for my former clients who I found ugly inside and out. Story 11. Dancer here. I remember being chill and excited about it. This was 20 years ago. The next few times were a little more nerve-wracking because what does an 18-year-old have to say to middle-aged men, you know? Took me a while to get comfortable. Now I'm a pro and can't wait till the clubs open again. Story 12. I knew what it would be like going into it. I'd been working for the agency for a few months as a driver, taking the girls to their appointments, making sure they didn't get robbed or killed. My boss mentioned that he had had some interest from females, wanting a male escort. I'd seen Deuce Bigelow. I figured, why the hell not? I was 18, and I cleaned up pretty nice. My first client was a woman in her late 30s. Not a supermodel, but not unattractive at all. She was in town for some auto parts convention and wanted someone to show her around. We wound up sleeping together after. I got my money and left the next morning. I did that until I moved out of state 3 years later. Story 13. Nerve-wracking, it was professional, but I was 21. It was just me and him, and he had to drive me to another location. But he was super nice and realized real quick I was nervous. So he talked to me the whole way there. He even made jokes while we were switching positions. Fun guy. I would have kept going in that line of work. But a friend caught Chilamita, so I was out. Story 14. I'm 21 and was an oil wrestler for a short time, just last year, and I was terrified. I had no practice or was shown anything. I made $10 in tips that night, but as it went on for the next 3 weeks, I began making more. The girls were really cliquey and at times total. The men we entertained were disgusting, low-hygiene cowboys and rude as Not my scene, but nothing but respect for the women who were able to have fun in that environment. Story 15. It was liberating. I was nervous at first, but all smiles afterward. Being a guy, I probably had different experiences. I was awkward looking even through my early 20s. I decided to become a rent boy when I realized there was a certain subsect of older gay gentlemen who appreciated the way I had aged and carried myself. I did it for about a year or so until I met my husband. All in all, I made some money and walked away feeling better about myself. Story 16. First job in the industry was a sexting operator for a dating website. I found out it was a scam. I was basically a bot and never got paid for talking to people. Lol, they owe me at least $120. I hope their site is exposed one day. Edit. First day was weird. I had to cater to a bunch of random guys. There was no training, just thrown into random chats with random guys. I basically made up nonsense to keep the convo going so they could buy more credits, to make the website rich while we get nothing. I was basically the person that was like, don't you like talking to me? Why won't you buy more credits then? Edit 2. Oh, I also forgot to mention, I remember feeling really weird the first day, because as bots, we had access to a bunch of random women's nudes. They looked like amateur porn stars or something, but I remember being like, who are these women? It just felt wrong. Story 17. Started at 19. Boyfriend of 3 years. Dumped me, so I moved to another city and become a hooker. Very first night on the job, it was a quiet night. Didn't get any jobs. My boss, an older man, took me upstairs to one of the rooms, pushed me down onto the bed and stuck his tongue down my throat. When I told him to stop and that I don't think we should be doing it, he said that I need to get comfortable working eventually. I think he felt bad because he gave me $100 and sent me back downstairs. The next day I had 2 jobs. The first one, my actual first full-service job ever. The dude was so high on coke, he came before I even touched him. The second job was the exact same, except we got far enough to put the condom on that time. I was like, damn, I hope it's all gonna be that easy. It definitely is not always that easy, but I love it. Edit. I'm being told coke doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, he did it in the room and I saw him do it, so I just assumed that was an affect of it. Sorry for being dumb about it. Story 18. I was 18 and naive. My first client chose me because I was new, fresh meat. He was a regular at the club. I was terrified but went along with it. He made me call him daddy, and every time he pushed into me, I winced from pain. He secretly took the condom off. The manager, a girl who gave me an introduction to her, never warned me of clients trying to take off condoms. I couldn't tell management about him since he was a regular at the club. They also never told me there was an emergency button to leave the room if I needed to. I only learned 3 years later when a client beat me. That's when I decided it was my last day. Story 19. I was kicked out left on my own. It's complicated at 19. I saw the writing on the wall and needed money fast. So I started as a stripper at 18. The Great Recession happened a few years later, and so I moved to escorting at 22. First job as a dancer was with 2 other girls to a private party. I had something of a debut, and while I had no idea what I was doing, I had my heels on and I knew how to shake my butt. I had literally $200 in singles just rained on top of me. 30 minutes of work. Who knew how much the other girls made? But I was hooked. The economy took a huge downturn a few years later, and so many of my regular hot times were not as prolific. I only worked on call, private parties, bachelor parties, rush week, etc., as I wanted to stay out of a fixed location due, but this would up hurting me in the long run. I turned to escorting through an agency who actually was pretty kind, and I'm still amazed I never had to audition for any of my agencies. He set me up with a John, who was an utter gentleman, kind and considerate, explained his side of things in a way that made sense and helped me find peace and less of a sense of guilt about what I was doing. I saw him a couple of times, but I think after that, my novelty wore off, which is fine. Every once in a while, my thoughts float to him and his beautiful golden retrievers. I hope he's living a good life somewhere. I'm pretty sure my life would have went a different way without those 2 experiences. And don't get me wrong, I've had plenty of just raunchy, awful, ungodly, unforgivable things done and said to me in my career for the sake of rent, but holding on to the few bright moments I had helped me make it through to financial and familial freedom, as well as retirement from the industry. Story 20. When I started, I was at an agency, so I didn't get to screen people myself or have as much of a role in who I decided to see. My first client was this super quiet, gentle old Asian guy who just wanted a slow blowjob by a pretty girl. Easy peasy. My second client was a completely covered in freckles dude who booked 2 hours and took a Viagra and literally wanted to have crazy, hard-pounding sex the whole time. I didn't really know enough to assert myself and be like, nah, bruh. But holy shit, I was so worried after that appointment that I'd have to do sessions like that regularly. Thankfully, I've only seen one other person like that, and I wasn't willing to do that, the full session. So we parted ways after that appointment, as I knew we weren't a good match. My third client was a super anxious and quiet tech guy who was really nerdy, and I eventually drew that out, and we bonded over it. And he was much more comfortable after that. Most of my friends are nerds since I grew up as a huge nerd, so that was totally in my wheelhouse. And awkward tech nerds have become some of my main bread and butter. I hope I'm helping them be less awkward and more confident over time with other women, and not just myself, but I know for sure I'm helping them get better in bed at least. This was a much more reassuring appointment than Viagra dude, and I was hoping more appointments would be like that. Fourth client was a super old dude who retired from finance and got a farm, and apparently works his farm every day and had super strong hands, and mainly spent the whole session giving me a massage and thanking me for the work that I do. It was so incredibly wholesome and the client ended up being the most representative of what my typical sessions look like and was a nice end to the day. Overall, the whole day put together gave me a nice range of what I might encounter in the industry. Story 21. Well, I'd like to start by saying I used to be a male escort at age 15. I looked way older than I was. My first day was a little awkward, but that's because at the time I was mute. I put up a flyer on Craigslist saying I was a young male mute escort and that I'd message my rates. At first I was scared, but not because it was my first time. I'm just a very shy introvert. When I got my first message, it was from a much older woman. She looked to be around 50. I told her my rates, and we talked about what was going to happen. She was sweet and caring, but she was one of those people you could just tell was lonely. Later that night, I got dressed. We met up at a hotel she had paid for, and we had sex. After that, though, for the rest of the time, we just cuddled, and she talked to me about her day, what's going on in her life, etc. And I just listened. So, all in all, my first day wasn't really bad. I just ended up being more shy than I had wanted to be. Story 22. I cam. My first time doing it, something happened and my stream was shown on a lot of different places, and I had almost 1,000 people show up. I was terrified going into it, but once the money started to get rolling, it felt a lot more natural. Story 23. I was a male escort very briefly in the early Uzurus. My first call was for a married couple at a hotel room in a casino. I arrived and went to the front desk to let them know I had arrived. This was before everybody had a cell phone, and I was told to wait in the lobby. It seemed like forever, and the longer I waited, the more nervous I became, until the wife walked up to me and asked if I was Jeremy, fake name. She was very attractive, and that was a relief. She took me up to their room where her husband was waiting nude in a chair. He was very much not attractive. He started barking orders at us to undress and do this and do that. I was fine with that, like I said. She was very attractive. Eventually, he decides to join in, and it suddenly is very awkward as he's quite out of shape and is having difficulty doing pretty much anything. This goes on for a while until he gets upset and huffs, "We're done here," and rolls off the bed to look outside the window and, I don't know, pout. I get dressed in a hurry while the wife is at the bar making a drink wearing just his shirt, with a weird smile on her face. I try to quietly take my leave, but she grabs me by the arm, almost drowns me by pouring this drink down my throat, gives me a kiss, and pushes me out the door. I felt a little weird, but I made $300 in less than an hour. I think I was just too young and inexperienced back then. I could be a pretty good escort now, but my selling point back then was that I looked younger than I was, and now I look like a fad extra from Sons of Anarchy. Anyway, it wasn't bad. It wasn't great. 5 of 10 for the hot wife. Story 24. I was a dancer in my college years. I was so nervous not because of the dancing, but because I was afraid I didn't look as good as the other girls. They wouldn't like me. It turns out they were so sweet and so diverse. One of my coworkers had 5 young kids. One of them was a PhD candidate at one of the local universities. One of them loved to bake in her spare time. Sharing small details like that about our lives made us grow together. Most of the regulars that came in were your average guys. Nothing weird or creepy. Eventually, when you got to know them enough, they would talk about things that stressed them out, like their debt or their job or my 13-year-old daughter's smoking, IDK what to do, and you'd be more of a listener and advice giver instead of a sexual being. Story 25. The first time ever escorting was not like I planned on, I'm gonna do this. I was propositioned at a club where I was dancing. I couldn't make it in a strip club. Was not making more than $100, $300 a shift, and every girl would brag about making $1 to $2K. I'm like, BTTF is wrong, you me. But I needed the deposit for my house and took him up on it. I look back and think, wow, I can't believe he even paid me that much, because I was definitely grossed out and unenthusiastic. Story 26. Not the same, but I met someone on a sugar daddy site since I was looking to be with someone who was in more finances than I. I ended up a survivor of repeated sexual assault, so not great. Edit. I have been working with Baltimore police for well over a year, and I believe he was a plant of a trafficking ring. 2 weeks ago, I got the call that the prosecutor will not be charging him. I have had a few trolls come for me. That's fine. I understand some people don't understand emotions and are rather sociopathic like that, but if I can help save another young person, it is worth it. I make TikTok videos about the dangers of online dating and have hundreds of thousands of views from them. People are dangerous, and the vulnerable do get preyed upon, and no cutesy little edgelord comment about deserving RP and abuse will ever scare me or hurt me like my abuser did. Story 27. In my early 20s, I did some escorting gigolo work. I was afraid at what type of women would be willing to pay for sex, and my first client was exactly what I expected. Luckily, she didn't want me to do anything to her and just wanted to give me my second client that day. However, wow, she was a legit 8 out of 10. She was a taller, 20-pound heavier version of Maria Menounos. You name it, she wanted to do it. She actually ended up being a repeat customer. Numerous times we would get together, and when all was said and done, was my best and most frequent client. She was extremely wealthy and just loved the idea of paying a man, other than her husband, to do the things we were doing. Story 28. 2009, just got back from Afghanistan. Before I went, I was confident in my moderate conservatism. By the time I got back, I was just completely different. A few months into moving to New Orleans after Afghanistan, I started exploring my mind and the constructs I had made for myself. I remember walking into the corner pocket and asking if I could dance for money. I'm a guy, and that is a gay strip club. The bartender asked if I can start that night, gave me some brand new in the package, freebie men's briefs and said, "Go nuts." Pun likely intended, and I did that night. I was at the point where I was tired of who I thought I should be and wanted to know what I really liked or didn't like, and why. I am going to regret telling this story, I think. I made tips. I had a damn great body thanks to nothing but physical exercise in the sandbox. I was scared and apprehensive, but I don't think anyone could tell. I had already learned a long time ago to keep my bearing and my bearing in, that circumstances should have looked like enthusiasm and non-hesitation. I adopted those in spite of my anxiety and just tried to own it. I spent about 6 months, maybe, immersing myself in the gay nightlife in New Orleans. Everyone knew I was straight and mostly didn't care. I learned a lot about that community, at least in part. I am under no illusion that the gay community only embodies that side of life, though. I would say that it is still among my best decisions, because I grew in emotional maturity and confidence. Edit. Thanks for the sentiments. We'll respond to questions soon. Story 29. I am an independent sex worker, and I just want to use this thread as an opportunity to give safety tips, because it looks like there are people asking questions because they are curious about starting themselves, especially right now, when so many have lost their jobs. 1. Location. Never bring a date to your home. Stalkers are a real danger in this business. Outcalls are dangerous unless you already know them. It's best to rent a hotel room and have them co-MW to you. 2. Always let someone in the world know where you are and that you're working, especially if you have to do an outcall with someone you haven't met before, because once again, that's dangerous. Let someone know the address and how long you are supposed to be working at that address. That way, if they haven't heard from you in over that time period, they know how to find you. 3. Never do car dates. That is how you get caught by the police or driven to a secluded area and killed. 4. When meeting someone that found you online for the first time, always talk with them over the phone and not just text that way. You can gauge whether or not they sound like a cop, and if it counts, like there are other people there. You don't want to go where there are more than one person. That's how you get gangbanged or not paid accordingly. Group mentality plus being horny equals danger. 5. Never agree to girlfriend experience or doing raw. If they will you without a condom, they will everyone without a condom. Your life isn't worth it. If you choose to do that anyway, never agree to it over the phone or online. It's illegal in every state, and that's the kind of stuff COPA are fishing for, to arrest. 6. Always get your money. First, be safe. And remember, this is not a great-ass job as anyone wants to make it out to be. Personally, it has ruined my sex life, hurt my ability to be in an honest relationship, and maybe permanently change the way I look at men. Story 30. Decades ago, I was a dominatrix, non-sexual, which means I rarely exposed myself and they couldn't touch me, and it was my choice to touch them. Prior, I had been a Playboy bunny, and the club had just closed. My mother bunny, manager, was working at the dungeon and got me the job. It was a very high-priced, exclusive establishment. I apprenticed under her, and the club had a gimp to practice on. I did about 5 days co-mistressing before my solo flight. My first client alone was a handsome German guy who was a regular every couple months, but I didn't know that. In my 2 years there, he was the most hardcore, depraved client I had. It was a setup, a joke they did on all the new girls. It was also my first time wearing latex, which is uncomfortable, constricting, and hot as hell. The rooms were kept at 70 degrees, but I was so nervous I could feel sweat running from the top of my head into my cleavage. I chained the guy to the X, and my arms kept sticking to the sides of the latex bodysuit and making a weird fart noise. I had a hard time staying in character. His back was to me, and I literally buckled over laughing every few minutes. He kept indicating he wanted to be whipped harder by saying he was sorry he was naughty. My arm was getting so tired it was shaking. The whole back of him was welting up and some spots were bleeding. Then he says he'll be good. Please don't score his tiny little penis, which it was the opposite of. I knew what scoring was, but I hadn't done it. Luckily, the rods were silicone and flexible. When I got the thickest one in, he said, "Don't give me an enema." I was like, TF? I put a blindfold on him and went to ask the headmistress what to say, and she hands me a velvety bag. Inside was a warm bottle, a tube, and lube. She also throws a sheet of plastic at me and says, "You're gonna need this." I went in and did my job, It was disgusting. It made slapping the much easier. When I removed the scoring rod, he came. It was so bizarre. I made $500 for a client like that. Mostly, the clients were just 40 minutes of degrading and torture. The job was mentally and physically draining, but never boring. Story 31. Gay male here. I had a pretty bad drug problem and would get money to fund it by posting on Craigslist to exchange sex for money, or drugs in a few rare instances. My first day on the job, I'd actually posted just to have a casual hookup for fun. But a guy that responded wasn't my type, but he offered me money to hook up, and I pretty much said okay because I was on drugs. I was really nervous that it was a cop, but he ended up being a really nice guy. I realized I could make it a hustle and ended up having sex pretty much once a day for money for like 3 years straight. Most of the guys were really normal, nice guys. I had a few scary times where the house would be nasty and roach infested, or they'd refuse to pay me and we'd argue. It was all done through Craigslist, and I'd never send a face pics, just body or X-rates pics. I don't think I would have accepted the initial offer if I wasn't on drugs. But as my addiction got worse, I relied on prostitution more and more and basically become a professional sex worker. I am since off drugs for a few years, and I used to look back on prostitution as shameful, but I have accepted and grown, and it's a part of my past. Story 32. I did phone sex for a bit, and the first day was awkward. I felt like I was in a corny porn from the 80s. There were also a surprisingly high number of men that asked which area I lived in and were weirdly insisting on knowing. I'm guessing BC it was over the phone. It felt more real to them. After a couple of hours, I got into my role, and moaning like a bad actress became easier and funnier, but the first hours definitely felt awkward. Story 33. Worked independent for a short while to support myself at a critical time. I was capable of taking my time to pick clients and be selective, even talk to them on a meet and greet coffee. First, because I was looking for long-term clients and regulars, rather than a dice roll each time. Those are called arrangements, because subscription or exclusive escort doesn't sound as nice. My experience was in general lovely. Most of the time was spent on talking over a couple of drinks. I was hesitant a little and perhaps nervous, but not enough that it shows. I would say I was too nervous about picking the payment and really didn't know what to do, other than kind of get stunned and silently ponder in my mind. That's when he caught that it's my first time and laughed, gave me some advice about being direct about payments, because clients might mistake a bond or abuse it otherwise. He was very nice and answered my questions when I needed advice, since he was a regular client to arrangement side of the sector. He stayed one of my 3 regulars for a long while, never picked more than 3 regulars since they want you to be available on call. Most of my time was with people who want to be listened, don't want to hassle or strings of relationships, yet have the benefits. When I think about it, it was 1 out of 5 sex, 2-5 chat, and 2-5 acting like their dream partner. Payment was good enough that I could afford being a migrant with no income. Otherwise, work was flexible enough that I could study. Clients were nice enough to help me with their local connections. Worst thing that ever happened to me was a meet and greet first date that consisted of an arrogant business owner talking about how awesome he is for 3 hours straight over a fancy lunch. At the end of it, I had the freedom to reject an arrangement and simply walked out. I dropped the job when I met my current partner, who wasn't comfortable with my work. It was no longer a critical time for me, so I could afford to have less income. But to be honest, it wasn't a bad job or what the cliches make it out to be. I had some good time and met some nice people, yet it was still very professional. Story 34. My first shoot was fine. I went in, I'd paid a makeup artist, so I got that done first. I shot 2 solo scenes, got my money, and went home. Then I ate fried chicken because I'd been fasting. It was amazing. Story 35. I had to do a tryout to see if I could pre-form in front of people in costume. Still not 100% sure why they chose this route, but whatever. I was asked to do a kid's part dressed as Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Kid-friendly, again, not sure why. The company was a 2-part, one for children's costumes parties. Rarely ever called upon since it was super cheap, and strippers that would come to your private party. Anyway, the night before, I was given the address, a wig, and fake mermaid tail for my legs. The problem is I have a tattoo on my upper arm, and obviously Earl never did this phase of her life. Lol. I was told to wear a white t-shirt with longish sleeves to cover it up. Problem was I had no plain white t-shirts with long enough sleeves. I ended up wearing a joke of a mermaid outfit over top of this Sam I Am t-shirt. I had that did not cover the tattoo entirely. I barely remember exactly what I did, but I remember sitting there, talking to the kids, and eventually sitting in the backyard for half an hour and painting absolutely horrible crabs, Sebastian, or fish on the children's faces for face painting. I still got paid, but it was incredibly painfully awkward. My time doing exotic dancing was less than productive, but at least not as entirely painful as that tryout. Also, the training I received for dancing consisted of a few practiced moves and less than 2 hours of work. In the end, my husband left me because I wanted out of dancing. They tried partnering me up with a girl I did not like or care for at all. Husband decided he liked all of the attention he was getting from girls he was paying. He ended up leaving his 3-year-old son and I for one of these crazy characters. Thankfully, he is now sitting in prison for the 3rd time, and it's because he violated his parole. Loser. Story 36. A bit late to this, but my mother and I ran a trap house, and we always had men stopping by and looking. One day, my mother told me that she had a friend that had some great weed and I should meet him. I was 20. We walked over to the friend's house, and she led me to the back of the house and introduced us and promptly left. It wasn't until we were smoking and he informed me that he added a bit of crack, and I was too nervous to say no. My first client was an 87-year-old who then threw $100 at me that my mother then demanded that I give her $70 for introducing us. It definitely could have gone much worse, but it was just a job to me, and I ended up making decent money. Story 37. Escort at a massage parlor here. I had a girl take me under her wing and explain how it worked. Clients can receive the standard massage and happy ending or upgrade. Tip, we each set our own amount for extras. I went into this job because I had done online work with videos and cam sessions before and loved being in the industry, but hated being chained to electronics. I heard good things about this place and went for it. My first day I was nervous simply because it was undiscovered territory to me. After meeting the customer, he was a walk-in, and putting him in the room after he booked a half-hour session, I remember having a minor freak-out in the girls' room, smoked a cigarette, then went in the room to greet him. He was in his early 30s and very handsome, and didn't last long. Once I had ripped the Band-Aid off and gotten over my nerves before that first one, the rest were great. My second guy of the day was young and hung like a horse and gave me a great time. The dude knows what he's doing. Damn, I can only remember those two from my first day. That was over a year ago, and I'm still happily employed there, though obviously not working at the moment. That would be the complete opposite of social distancing, LOL. Not one of my clients has ever been aggressive or, honestly, anything less than pleasant. I love my job, and I love making people feel good. My job helps satiate my high sex drive, and it also fills my wallet. I'm able to work 1 shift a week and make a boatload of money, so I'm able to support myself and still be a full-time university student. It's a win-win-win. 10/10 would continue the experience. Story 38. Male porn talent here. First day filming a scene was scary for me. This was back in 2007 BTW. I was nervous, shaking, just having stage fright, I guess you could call it. Sex is one thing, but videotaped with a crew and following a loose script. It added up to the point that I was honestly almost considering bailing out. My female counterpart in the scene was very nice and helped me get over it. I still chat with her today as friends. She's not in the industry anymore. Story 39. I knew a girl who was definitely a prostitute, but wouldn't be able to answer this question because she kind of slowly slid into it over time. She was into the sport bike scene and would go to the group meetups on Friday night. One time she hooked up with a guy and the next morning he was like, "Want to go shopping? I'll buy you an outfit." And she said, "Okay." Then at some point a guy was like, "Hey, want to come home with me tonight and I'll take you shopping tomorrow?" And she thought to herself, I would have f***ed him anyway, so why not? Etc., etc. Until she was straight up propositioning, "Hey, I'll f*** you tonight for 100. I have no idea what her price was. To any point was it for sure prostitution, and at what point was it just a sugar daddy type thing? Story 40. I put my ad up on a website, he replied. We set up a meeting. He paid for the room and got there first. I was so nervous. I imagined being arrested for prostitution. My picture in the paper. What would my family say? I imagined being choked to death, unable to scream. So many horrible thoughts. I regretted this. I shouldn't be doing this. This is horrible. Karma is going to get me. When he opened the door, he had this welcoming, warm smile. We began making out, and really, all that happened after that was 45 minutes of being eaten out and less than 1 minute of sex at the end that I wished it would have lasted longer. He offered extra money at the end. I absolutely was expecting to feel degraded and used at the end of this. Instead, I felt like I had just been worshipped. We kept in touch for 3 years afterward. On the drive home, I said to myself, and to think I've been doing this for free all this time. Story 41. First time I posed for a photographer, I was very nervous, but he didn't allow models to smoke or drink beforehand. When he asked me to jack off in front of him, it took a bit to get hard. First time I shot a video, I was also really nervous, but it was a solo, and I just relaxed after listening to the director tell me how to move around. When the other model showed up, it was just a laugh for a bit, until he went down on me and I was focusing on the model, and not the guy with the camera watching us and telling us what to do. Story 42. First day ever, they put me on a Sunday shift to ease me into it. One of the girls gave me a lap dance to demonstrate some skills and how to dance for customers. I'll never forget my first dance. An African-American man who was wearing sweatpants asked for a dance. We went in the room and I had to navigate away from his giant whiner, clearly popping up under his sweatpants. It was a very strange dance and I smiled through it. He ended up by at least 10 to 12 dances. Though not my very first day, I do remember sitting with a customer and he asked me what I wanted to drink. I was not a big drinker. The first beverage that came to mind was Heineken. I sat with that man and forced myself to drink that beer. I hate beer. Another instance, I bought a thong from the local exotic dancer shop. It turned out to be too small. Looking back, it was probably for people entertaining in the bedroom and not on stage. During a day shift, the few customers who were there got quite the show. I learned that day to buy better dance thongs from the bonus story. When I auditioned, I dressed up like a schoolgirl. Apparently, I thought everyone wore character costumes, cop, fireman, etc. Boy, was I mistaken. I had pigtails and all. I still got the job and I learned about appropriate dance attire and gowns, etc. Story 43. Male here. I was a bartender and was getting propositioned a lot. One night, I jokingly told a woman that was coming on strong to me that I would go back to her hotel room with her, but it was going to cost her. She was offended at first then, later on, told me that she would be happy to pay. She left me a $150 tip on a $30, $40 tab and her hotel key. I went up to her room that night, scared shitless. We went right to it. She had this sense of entitlement. She was telling me exactly what she wanted me to do and I tried to keep up. It was very businesslike. I performed a lot better than I normally would have. She was demanding and I felt obligated to meet those demands because she was paying me to be there. It was a strange encounter. She and I did this quite a few times. She was in town for business about twice a month and would have me up there almost every time she was in town. Every time it was sex only. Not much conversation. She wasn't trying to get to know me and wasn't trying to reveal anything about herself. She would pay me $150 every time we met up. Story 44. Stripper. I started after I turned 18 by waitressing at a club and was planning on dancing when summer started. I didn't last 2 weeks before I was on the floor as a dancer. I don't remember anything specific about my first day. Essentially, they just throw you out there and say, talk to men sell dances. It was weird and forward at first, but really all it takes is walking up and saying, hi, can I sit here? The first few weeks were filled with me being awkward, selling dances, mostly based on the fact I was brand new and 18, watching the other girls in VIP so I had a clue what to do, and being taken under a random girls' wing every night. The first time I ever tried to do a proper spin on stage, it looked ridiculous, and the DJ literally said, she's still new, folks. My first time escorting was pretty easy because I had been dancing for a year or so. Mostly just felt like a fancy date where I didn't spend the night and made a bunch of money and wasn't on the hook to call the guy tomorrow. What I would give to be shaking my ass for money right now. It's tough times for us whores. Story 45. Former escort driver here. Finally, a question I have a good answer for. My first night was terrifying. The girl I was driving around was held at gunpoint, and the guy was demanding she give him the money he paid her back to him after services were already received by him. She managed to call the escort office with the phone in her pocket while it was going on. They called me and told me to go get her. She was pretty badass herself and was refusing to give up the $300. This was not at all what I expected for Utah County, and I was only a $150 Utah boy and didn't plan for this. I grabbed the only weapon I had in my car, which was a machete, and I pounded on the door. Lucky she came running out a second after. He thought she was bluffing when she told him that she had somebody waiting outside for her. The pounding on the door spooked him. She kept the money too. Story 46. I've been in just about every facet of the adult industry since I was legally able to do so. Somewhere in there was an attempt to be an escort, and you would think with all the other experiences it would have gone smoothly, but it did not. I was a purely sexual being at that time and did not want to chit-chat. But getting straight to it is more prostitute territory. Get down to business versus spend time together before getting down to business. It was awkward because I didn't know what to say or how to artificially get to know someone before getting to the sex. All I wanted to do was get naked. When it came time to finally get intimate, though, things went very smoothly. It was my only client of the day, so I did not feel pressured. The experience taught me that I was not escort material, though. Much more of a prostitute than anything else. Of course, that was a long time ago, and now I think I would do well in both categories. In fact, getting paid to do nothing but sit and talk sounds delightful. Story 47. I was briefly a sex worker, and my first day was terrifying. I'd spoken to a couple of people who were also in the business, and they'd told me lots of horror stories, possibly to frighten me off, possibly to make sure I didn't make the same mistakes. So I was practically wrapped in a chastity belt when I arrived. I had texted 2 people and said, if I don't text back by this time, call the police, and told them the place I was going. I met this guy at a hotel, and we made small talk, and it was, well, if it had been a real date, I wouldn't have wanted to go on a second. We went to a room and the expected happened. Thankfully, I was able to perform despite the nerves. I never realized the distinction from sex for pleasure and sex for business. I was so concentrated on the practical aspects that I didn't really enjoy it. I suspect that's something I would get over in time, but I didn't stay in the industry for long enough to experience it. Story 48. A little late, but I work as an entertainer for bachelorette parties on the side. Not exactly a stripper or sex worker, but bartender, server, host games, etc. Do it nearly naked, just wearing an apron. First gig, I was definitely super nervous going in, especially because I'm kind of a shy guy. Took a couple shots in the car before calling them to let me in. I was working with someone else too, and he showed me the ropes, and it turned out to be a riot. The girls were super respectful and thought it was cute. They were my first party. I've been doing it for nearly 3 years now, and it's a ton of fun and great extra cash. There aren't many jobs where you get paid to party with fun people from all over the world. And over the years, it's helped me open up, gain confidence, and overcome some of the social anxiety I struggled with when I was younger. Walking into a room full of strangers almost naked over and over changes you, I suppose. Story 49. It was intimidating and overwhelming at first, but then it was a rush. I had never danced before. I was shy, but as I met clients and told them it was my first time, they were excited and supportive. I'm not a great dancer, and that night set the tone for me. I didn't need to rely on my dancing to make money, but I could fall back on my personality and figure. My only regret looking back is that I did not work more and that I drank too much. I wish I had the drive for money because these times of quarantine would have been easier if I were saving, instead of living my life on easy mode all the time. Story 50. I've been a sugar baby for about 1.5 years. My first arrangement taught me a lot about things I wouldn't have learned otherwise. The first night we saw each other at a hotel was extremely nerve-wracking, but I played it as calmly as possible. We'd already been chatting for about a couple weeks at that point, including going to dinners and getting to know each other, texting back and forth, etc. I felt fairly confident at that point that he wouldn't try something funny or take advantage of me. And I was right. Still, the first time having sex with someone you're processing a transaction with isn't cake, but luckily my good friend alcohol, 1 glass of wine, helped calm my nerves. In the end, it wasn't a bad experience at all, and we ended up clicking very well. Story 51. I was scared, but my SD and I just talked to break the ice. We talked about my family, and then it turns out my SD and my mom went to high school together, and my SD had a huge crush on her. After that, he wouldn't stop talking about my mom. When we started having sex, he started calling me my mom's name, and I never saw him again. Story 52. Late to the party. I've dabbled in real-life sex work in the past. My first time was really scary for me, but the client was very kind and considerate, and the experience ended up being really easy. I left the session feeling like I'd been lied to by society all this time. I didn't feel traumatized or dirty or bad. I'd had a good time and made a lot of money. I remember feeling like an idiot for not having started escorting when I was 18. Story 53. Cam worker here. For me, it was definitely a better experience than any other first day I've had. Banker, retail worker, etc. The only downside was that I felt a lot of uncertainty about what I was supposed to be doing and what kinds of lines, boundaries, etc. I could have. Spoiler alert. It was all up to me the whole time. Once I realized this, problems evaporated. Story 54. I've never hired a prostitute before, but I gave one a ride once. She was hitchhiking from a gas station that I stopped at, and we chatted for the 5-minute drive. From her take, seems to align with everything else here. She said she was actually fairly close with her clients, and she didn't usually get any creepers. She also noted that she wanted to leave that job, but it definitely wasn't as bad as it's made out to be in media. Only real difference noted is that she said the money wasn't great at all. Well, it's nothing against prostitution, it's just not the kind of way I'd ever like to get laid. Story 55. I'm a pro-dom. I was lucky that I got into an educational community, so I had some really supportive women around me, and I felt empowered. I didn't, of course, tell my sub that it was my first time. It went really great. Pegged the hell out of him with another dom. Story 56. Former stripper, nervous. I'm not really a flirtatious person or anything, so I had to make a character, basically. The girls were amazing, but dancing on a stage with a bunch of drunk, horny guys is unnerving at first. But dancing with another girl on stage and just watching yourself is the key at first. At the end, I even had friends come by and it was super fun. I just went in at the wrong time and never made a lot of money, really. Story 57. Not myself personally, but I'm very close with someone who used to be an escort sugar baby for a couple years. She said she was nervous the first day and quickly got over it because a lot of the men she saw, she also had many regulars, were mostly just lonely, single older guys who wanted to take her to dinner and just have company in general. Story 58. First day as street sex worker. I was 17 years old. I was terrified jumping into a stranger's car. He was extremely nice. But honestly, it went well. Made my first income of $70 tax-free. 8 years on and off working on the streets until I finally found my purpose in life. I'm 29 years old now. Working as a registered nurse in ed. Street working made me who I am today. I don't regret anything. Story 59. My first day was more odd than probably other people's. I work in a small fetish community on Instagram. I had been there a while to begin with. Just one day I put it out there that I would make customs.